My name is Catherine Wang, a human capital consultant at E1 Consulting, a Kastech company. Kastech is a leading ERP services, cloud, and transformation company, and E1 Consulting is a division of Kastech and a Workday implementation and managed services partner. I mostly focus on process optimization projects and solution design for our clients. I'll be your host today. Let me introduce today's speakers. So first we have Sridhar Conru, Workday Practice Director at Kastech, a 10-year veteran in ERP systems implementation. Good to have you here, Sridhar.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the discussion, Catherine.
Also on the panel, we have our own veteran solutions architect, Mahesh Sampath-Kumar, from Kastech's E1 Consulting Group. Mahesh has been a solutions architect for 20 plus years with experience designing multiple solutions such as PeopleSoft, SAP, SuccessFactors, and Workday. Welcome, Mahesh.
Happy to be here, Catherine.
And finally, we have Steve Hudson, who will be our moderator today. Steve is a director of client success at Kastech, helping clients maximize outcomes in the SaaS application space for over 12 years. Welcome, Steve. I'll hand it over to you from here.
Appreciate it, Catherine. Thanks for the warm introduction to myself and both the panel. Today's topic is an important one, and we'll go ahead and split that into 4 parts. So part 1, we'll go over the legacy ERP cost drain. Part 2 will be the limitations of ERP or legacy ERP systems. Part 3, real transitions and success stories, or case studies and clients. And part 4, the path forward. Again, thanking everyone for their attendance today. Great to have you here with us. We will be ending with a Q&A session, so please feel free to write your questions in the Q&A or chat, and we'll either pick them up as we go or go ahead and answer those at the end. So let's go ahead and get started with part 1, the legacy ERP cost drain. Legacy ERP systems create friction across the business. Modern cloud platforms are designed to remove it. This simple chart shows the difference between the 2 environments, and I'll read a couple comparisons here. So you have reactive versus predictive, manual versus automated, on-premise complexity versus cloud-native agility, technical debt reduced due to a scalable foundation. Essentially, this chart is just showing the difference between the 2 environments, and the resistance to shifting to a modern ERP is often cost-based, yet there are many hidden costs to actually staying on the system itself. Mahesh, what does the data tell us about how legacy systems are holding back finance and HR function teams today?
Sure, Steve. We see that there's a direct impact on financial visibility, workforce performance, and growth. We picked a few surveys here for collecting data here. One Gartner survey, it shows that 70% of CFOs struggle with real-time data to be able to make adequate decisions in their decision making. Another Deloitte study, which shows that 52% of HR leaders are struggling with information that provides insight into workforce needs. There is another Deloitte study that shows that 72% of CEOs feel that the talent gaps in their organization lead to actual business challenges.
Those are alarming statistics, Mahesh. Sridhar, explain why staying with legacy systems is a false economy.
Sure. So if you see on the slide, there are 2 sections to it, and the top one is where it all starts with. And many organizations stay on this legacy ERP thinking that it still works for them, but that creates a false economy. And while the system appears stable, the hidden operational cost continues to grow over time. And legacy ERP drain, especially value in 3 key ways that you see on the top. The first and the foremost, the system appears stable, which creates a comfort zone. And the second is the hidden inefficiencies that accumulates through the manual processes and disconnected workflows. And the third one being the cost shift that is visible in terms of your IT spending. And there are 5 major hidden cost drivers behind these 3 factors. And the first and the foremost being the manual workarounds and duplicate efforts, where employees rely on the spreadsheets, emails, and repeated data entry to compensate from the system limitations. And the second one being integration complexity, which is like connecting these legacy ERPs with other modern applications that becomes expensive and difficult over a period of time. And the third and the important one is the delayed and inconsistent reporting. And without the real-time visibility, decision making would slow down, and the reporting accuracy would definitely suffer. And the fourth being compliance and audit exposure. It might be applicable from one organization to the other depending on their size, where these older systems may not meet the evolving security, regulatory, and other audit requirements, which is increasing the business risk. And the last one being the talent and productivity friction. So most of this legacy system reduces employee productivity, while the skilled resources for older technologies are becoming harder to find these days. So all in all, while staying on the legacy ERP may seem cost effective in the short term, but the hidden cost continues to accumulate over a period of time. And these inefficiencies would result in reducing agility, increasing the risk from the audit processes, and ultimately cost more than the modernization that we're talking about today. Steve.
Yeah, if it's not working today, it certainly isn't going to be working tomorrow or down the road.
Yeah, you're right.
So Peter, let's dive into the first hidden cost of manual workaround and duplicated edit.
Sure, that's a great question, and let's look at how does it matter to the C-level folks, and start off with from a CFO perspective. The financial visibility is constrained by some of the system limitations, and the very reason for this is that because the data is spread across multiple disconnected systems and spreadsheets, where finance teams spend excessive time collecting, reconciling, and validating the information, where they have to analyze it. So, in fact, it's an alarming study that we have seen that finance teams spend nearly 59% of their time just preparing the numbers. And the business impact is significant. So, what results with this is the slower financial close cycles with limited real time insight, heavy dependency on online reporting, and reduced ability to perform scenario based modeling or respond quickly to the market changes. So let's shift gears to a CHRO's perspective. So from a CHRO's view, workforce effectiveness is also constrained by these outdated systems, where employees often spend too much time searching for information or navigating through the fragmented processes instead of just focusing on the productive work. And there are researchers that shows that employees can spend up to 40% of their time looking for information, while the HR team spend as much as like 57% of the time on administrative activities rather than relying on or working on some strategic workforce initiatives. So all in all, this creates a fragmented employee experience, limited workforce planning capabilities, poor data accessibility for the leadership. And this will also increase dependency on HR operational teams as well. So the key takeaway is this: that the legacy systems don't just create the IT challenges, but they're directly impacting the business productivity. Steve.
Yeah, seeing it from the C-suite view really changes the perception on both cost and effort.
Yeah.
The second hidden cost is around IT integration complexity and maintenance. Mahesh, feel free to walk us through this.
Sure. Gartner studies show that like 60 to 80% of IT budgets are spent maintaining these legacy systems rather than innovating. And we can see that there's integration heaviness. Legacy ERP environments often become integration heavy because every new business need adds another custom interface, a middleware layer, or some sort of manual dependency. And over time, IT teams spend more effort keeping these connections stable rather than building new capabilities, which is why you can see that legacy maintenance can consume up to 60 to 80% of IT budgets. Modern cloud ERPs, they reduce this burden with cleaner APIs, standardized integration patterns, and an integration platform that's part of the overall stack. And in overall, it's a more scalable foundation for automation and innovation.
Yeah, I can't agree more on that, Mahesh, because from what we have seen, the challenge with the legacy ERP systems is every time the business grows or adds a new applications, and another integration gets layered over it whenever this new application need to talk to their existing systems. And with this, over time, the environment becomes more and more complex to manage. And what starts as a simple workaround eventually would turn into an highly IT dependent ecosystem that's difficult and also expensive to maintain.
Yeah, if we're spending 75% keeping the lights on, there's really never an opportunity to move forward, and that's equally as costly as it is frustrating. So, cost three will be the delays and inconsistent reporting. Mahesh, dive in.
Sure. 2024 survey of over 1,300 global CFOs, it showed that almost 40% they lack confidence in their data accuracy, and they have low visibility into their cash flow. In addition, the lack of visibility into real-time data is impacting value realization at organizations. PwC's 2026 Digital Trends Report in Operations Survey, it shows that poor data quality undermines finance and operational decision making. Legacy ERP reporting often requires like too much manual validation before leaders can really trust the numbers. And that delay, it creates a decision-making cost because finance and operations are reacting to outdated or inconsistent data. Modern ERPs, they help by creating one trusted source of truth with real-time visibility and faster and more confident decisions for these leaders. Steve.
Yeah, it really tracks that delayed reporting leads to longer audit cycles and reduced visibility. Yeah. Let's go ahead and take a look at the costs related to compliance and risk exposure. Streeter, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so that's accurate and you're spot on. And this will increase the preparation times for the audit teams. And as organization grows, regulatory expectations continue to increase across both public and private sectors. But legacy systems often struggle to keep pace because the data is fragmented, controls are inconsistent, and processes rely heavily on manual intervention. And one major impact is the audit complexity, where we see that audit cycles become longer and more resource intensive because teams spend extra time gathering evidence, reconciling data, and validating reports across these systems. For many mid-market private companies, this audit cost can range from 75,000 to $50,000, and those cost increases as system complexity grows. So that's a big number to watch out. And legacy environments also create some significant audit friction where teams face longer audit preparation cycles, more support requests from auditors, greater sampling and testing efforts, and delays in financial close processes. And over time, this reduces confidence in the reporting accuracy and operational transparency. And another major concern is that the risk of error that we cannot ignore. And with the fragmented systems, what happens often is that they create multiple versions of truth across departments, where finance, HR, operations, and other reporting systems are not fully aligned, which will result in inconsistencies and compliance gaps. So the key takeaway is that the compliance risk is no longer just an IT issue, but it's now grown to be a business risk. And many of these modern ERPs help organizations to standardize these controls and improve traceability, and also strengthen this reporting confidence, which will reduce the operational burden that is associated with these audits and keep the systems in check.
Good insight identifying some of the complexities of the tree. I appreciate that. So I'll go ahead and wrap up this last one. Cost five would be the talent and workforce impact. So to attract top talent, employees expect a great user experience. They're accustomed to consumer grade, seamless experiences from their everyday lives like Amazon, Netflix, and 74% of them, that's 3 out of every 4, state that they have a low tolerance for clunky systems. So going to this slide is on the compounding effect. So what this model is meant to show is that legacy ERP costs are rarely just one obvious line item. Most organizations look at the center of the platform and think that they understand the cost, whether it's licensing, infrastructure, support, maybe a few internal resources keeping the system running, etc. But legacy ERP cost behaves much more like an onion. The first layer is visible, but once you start to peel it back, the cost begins to compound. At that inner ring, we have a core platform itself. This is where most organizations focus. It's the maintenance fees, your hosting, upgrades, and patchwork, and the technical resources that are actually required to keep the system itself stable. The cost is real, but it's usually really only a starting point. The middle ring is where the drain becomes more operational, where businesses and the users begin working around the system versus working strictly through it. Finance teams build manual spreadsheets. HR teams are grabbing data from multiple places. Operation leaders rely on offline reports and email approvals and tribal knowledge. The ERP technically still functioning, but the business is spending thousands of hours a year compensating for what the system cannot easily do. Then you get to the last and outer, the third ring here, where the cost becomes strategic. Legacy platforms often limit how quickly the business can adapt automation, analytics, AI, and modern reporting. Leaders don't just lose efficiency, they lose that visibility. They can't easily answer basic questions around workforce trends, cost drivers, customer behavior, or operational risk without manual intervention. The outermost layer is often the most overlooked layer. The workforce ages with the technology that you're on. So the people who actually understand the legacy system become harder and harder to replace, more expensive to retain, and increasingly essential to keeping the lights on for the organization. Over time, salary costs, knowledge concentration, and technical debt all start weighing heavily across the broader tech stack. So when companies evaluate ERP modernization purely as a software cost decision, they're really missing the bigger financial picture. So the better question is not what will a new ERP cost us, but what is the hidden cost of our legacy ERP across labor, inefficiency, delayed insight, and the inability to scale. So that's essentially the point of this model. Most organizations identify cost one, but most of the costs really happen between layers 2 and 4. So Mahesh, what does the hidden cost look like in dollars and cents for a mid-silo?
Yeah, sure. So we've developed if you see the slide here, a conservative model for a typical 2,500 employee organization, let's say $250 million in revenue. The goal here is to show the magnitude of cost that most organizations aren't seeing. And we made some assumptions, very conservative assumptions. Cost one, average salary is $100,000 with a 10 to 15% productivity lost due to manual processes. And then we are assuming 12% of employees are in finance, HR, and operations. And so that's the average cost of like 4.5 million there. And then there's IT maintenance and integration burden. From our experience, we've seen that for organizations of that size, it's a typical cost of about $1.5 to $3 million a year. And then cost three is reporting delays. We assume missed opportunities in decision making could cost the company about 1 to 2% of revenue. And that's an average of about 3.5 million there. And the fourth cost is audit inefficiency. We're estimating that conservatively, the blowout audit cost by at least 10%. And then the fifth cost is the talent and workforce friction. And that can lead to maybe 0.5% to about 1% impact on revenue. So summing it all up overall, we are calculating here that on the low side, it could be about 8 million in hidden costs. And on average, it could be as much as $11.6 million.
That's an absolutely stunning final number for companies to stomach annually. Thanks for that. That'll conclude our deep dive on the hidden costs. We'll move on to part 2, which is on the limitations of legacy systems itself. So Mahesh, why don't you help us understand why legacy ERP systems are limited in general?
Sure. Legacy ERPs, they are built around like siloed architectures, right? Where finance, HR, and operations and reporting, they often operate in separate structures. And that makes it harder to get like a unified view of the business. They also rely heavily on like batch-based processing. So information is often moved and reconciled after the fact instead of being available in real time. And as business needs change, these systems usually require more customization rather than simple configuration or extension. And over time, these factors, they reduce flexibility, they increase maintenance requirements, and they make overall transformation even more harder. Steve?
Yeah, lean is mean, for sure.
Yeah.
Lean is mean. Is this the right slide, bro? Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about the differences within the team structure?
Sure. Yeah. One major difference with modern cloud ERP platforms is that the organizations don't no longer need these large teams focused on infrastructure maintenance and technical support. Cloud platforms reduce the dependency on upgrades, patching, and custom integration maintenance, and this allows teams to focus more on strategy, automation, analytics, and business enablement. The result is overall it's a leaner technology organization that spends much less time maintaining the systems and a lot more time driving transformation and innovation across the organization.
Yeah, appreciate that. Now, a big limitation is the need for ongoing investment. Let's continue going on and tell us about the legacy investments due to infrastructure.
Sure. A large part of that is the very familiar on-prem versus cloud discussion comparison. Customers don't need to think about all the overhead around servers, their performance, databases, or the application layer. And all these layers require constant upkeep and headcount to do that. And the integration tools and reporting tools, they require updates as well. In the modern ERP world, there's no need to upgrade them or fine-tune them. They're always up to date and they're always fine-tuned to perform, and all with no additional cost.
Thanks. Sridhar, what are the implications of maintaining legacy to state and local organizations?
Sure. So moving on to the local government side of it, the challenge is not just the legacy system stop working for them, but it's that it still requires continuous investment without delivering some meaningful progress that they're looking for. So speaking to most of these agencies, we feel that they need continue spending on the upgrades, maintenance, and middlewares that they use to integrate with other systems just to keep the systems operational. That's the minimal investment that we are looking at. But those investment would often, improve stability without improving capabilities or user experience, which is like a lot of money spent on just the overlay side of it. And over time, what we have seen in this, the middleware and these custom integrations, they start replacing the true platform integrations, creating more complexity and increasing IT dependency. But because most of these custom integration that we bring onto those systems, it comes with a lot of maintenance to do with. And while cost continues to rise, the organizations is not necessarily gaining better agility and insights or modernization benefits. So that's a bigger concern. So that's where we see many of the public organizations find themselves in what we call the extend versus transform trap, where continuing to extend the life cycle of the legacy ERP while delaying the broader transformation that needed to support their future operational goals. Steve.
Yeah, it's band-aid on a bullet hole sometimes. Mahesh,
Yeah.
how do these costs apply in the corporate space?
Yeah, the key things we see are like the disconnected HR and finance systems, right? When HR and finance operate in separate systems, workforce plans, labor costs, headcount, and financial forecasting, they all become harder to align and trust. Next thing is limited analytics and insight. Legacy systems, they often provide static and delayed reporting rather than real-time analytics, which corporations demand, and making it harder for leaders to identify trends, risks, and opportunities. And then in the corporate world, there's a lot of business change. System needs to keep running with them. Legacy systems may be reliable enough to keep it running, but that stability often comes with rigidity, slower change, and a limited ability to support modern changing business needs. And last thing I would like to point is the high operational overhead. Organizations continue spending on technical upgrades, patches, version changes, tool upgrades. But with all these upgrades, the business often sees very little improvement in actual automation, reporting, or end user experience.
Just a heavy cause of frustration there, Mahesh, no doubt about it. We hear it all the time.
Yeah.
Seems like the big difference between legacy ERPs and modern ERPs is kind of in that decision-making process. Legacy ERPs are a system of record, whereas modern ERPs are a system of insight. Peter, briefly explain what a shift to a modern ERP unlocks for an organization.
Yeah. So decision making is what we would expect from most of these systems, right? So a shift from this legacy to modern is not just a replacement of the system, but it's an operating system transformation is how it needs to be looked at. And when you see the comparison on the screen, especially around the operating model, where there's a shift to a unified data model where you don't need to go from place to place to look for data, where you can query all this data from a single unified data model that will interconnect with a lot of these individual uh, schools or modules that we call them, get those insights to you. And talking more about data, there is a real-time financial visibility and analytics that we can gather from these systems. And moving on to the CHRO side of it, where from the workforce, there is an integrated workforce and financial planning features that would help the CHROs to envision the kind of workforce that they wanted to bring in and how much cost that they need to be prepared for this additional workforce that they wanted to bring in, and all those planning activities. And especially for the decision making side of it, so there are embedded automation and faster decision cycles that this modern ERPs come with. And this transformation from legacy to modern would provide an avenue for continuous innovation and also some scalable foundation for growth. Steve.
Yeah, modernization is no longer an option. It's simply becoming a requirement for reasons like this.
Yeah,
We'll go ahead
absolutely.
and shift gears to explore some real transition and success stories. This is just a quick slide on Workday in the Magic Gartner Quadrant. It's been a leader for the last 10 years and recognized as Gartner Freelance's Pure Insights Customer Choice for ERP. And I know at least this past year they were recognized three separate times across HR, HCM, and finance. So moving towards that leadership area, if not already a piece of that plan today. Treater, what success and ROI are organizations seeing who are actually transitioning into it?
Yeah, ROI, that's what we would look for, right, from any of these systems. So let's look at the business value side of this modernization, where organizations moving to platforms like Workday, they're not just replacing the technology, but they're also improving efficiency, agility, and workforce productivity across the enterprise, not just with a particular department, right? So, a recent LinkedIn poll conducted within the Workday community, the majority of the respondents estimated that the average ROI that they see is in anywhere between 225 to 322% over 3 year period, with an overall average around like 273% of the ROI. So that's 3x of the ROI that we are looking at here. So the level of return comes from several areas. If we look at it in that way, one can be the reduced manual effort and lowering the maintenance cost, and improved reporting, better employee experience, and faster decision making. So it might not be only the dollars all the time, but a lot of organizational gains also needs to be considered as part of the ROI. And what's important is that many of these modern cloud platforms like Workday are designed differently from these legacy systems, where they're like purpose driven and they're built for like continuous innovation, for easier integration with other systems, real time insights, and a more connected workforce experience is what you see with this modern ERPs like Workday. So the conversation is no longer just about replacing the old technology. So now it has shifted to like unlocking some measurable business value and creating a platform that can scale with the future growth of the organizations.
I can't imagine an organization turning their nose without that 3x ROI.
Yep.
Based on that, Mahesh, why don't you go ahead and give us an overview of Workday today?
Sure, Steve. So the slide that we see here is a good way to think about Workday as a platform and not just as an application. At the center, if you see, are the core products and modules: HR, finance, planning, industry solutions, and analytics. These are the areas where organizations run their day-to-day business process, from managing people and workforce data to financial operations, planning, and reporting. What makes Workday different is that these modules are not sitting on separate technology stacks or databases. They are all supported by a common cross-application services such as a shared data model, shared security model, resiliency, and business processes, reporting, and analytics. This means that HR, finance, and planning, they can all operate from the same foundation rather than depending on fragmented systems and reconciled data. And then you have the integration and the interoperability layer. Workday Integration Cloud helps connect Workday with a broader enterprise ecosystem, payroll providers, benefit systems, third-party applications, and industry-specific platforms. This is important because ERP modernization does not have to mean that everything lives only inside one system. It means that the core platform can connect cleanly and securely with the rest of the organization. On top of all that, there is Workday Extend, which is a platform that gives organizations a way to build custom experiences and applications without heavily customizing the core ERP. So instead of recreating legacy complexity inside the new system, customers can extend Workday in a safe, controlled, and scalable way. And finally, to wrap it all up, the AI layer shows where Workday is headed. Intelligent data core, enterprise LLMs, AI agents, AI gateway, and the recently announced AI agent marketplace. The key message is that AI is being embedded into the same trusted platform where the business data, security model, and the business processes already exist. And that is what enables Workday to move from being only a system of record to a true system of insight and action.
Great job introducing Workday, Mahesh. So Workday has rapidly picked up momentum and usage over the last 4 years. Sridhar, tell us about its recent success stories, both government sectors and in the corporate side as well.
Yeah. So as we see, like Workday has picked up a lot of momentum in the state and local government area, and we see a tremendous growth in more and more customers added onto that list. And this is continuing with the continuous growth rapidly, especially across the government organizations. And this momentum reflects that a broader shift away from legacy towards the modern platforms. So, what Workday was also recognized as part of the Gartner Peer Insight customer, like Steve has mentioned in the past. So, what especially important here is that the scale and maturity of adoption. So, what we're seeing is hundreds of government organizations and millions of users already operating on the platform, and with that number continuing to grow year after year. So, why organizations are choosing Workday is because it provides a more connected, agile, and user-friendly experience compared with the traditional ERP systems out there. So, it supports continuous innovation, better reporting, stronger compliance capabilities that they are looking for, and also improved workforce experience. So with Workday, it also reduces the risk of standing still as more and more organizations planning to modernize and those remaining on the legacy would face increasing challenges around this integration, talent, and other operational efficiencies.
Well, building on that concept of momentum, we've now reached part 4 on our path forward. When after this one, we'll hit our Q&A session. So there comes a point where modernization becomes a critical element for organizations to adopt. When is that for most companies, Mahesh?
Yes, Steve. So in this slide, we call that the inflection point there. It's the point where modernization becomes difficult to ignore. These signals, they may start small, a few manual workarounds here and there, a few delayed reports, a few difficult integrations. But over time, they become the normal way the business operates. Once the organization crosses that inflection point, there is usually no light at the end of the tunnel without modernization. The system may continue to run, but the cost of operating it keeps increasing in time, money, effort, and lost efficiency. That is why we say that organizations should not wait until legacy ERP becomes a crisis. The right time to act is when these warning signs are visible enough to build a strong business case, but early enough to modernize with control, clarity, and a phased approach.
Yeah, make sure you're aware of these signals as an organization before it gets too far down the road there.
Yeah.
Trader?
Yeah, sure. So this modernization need not be like a small project that goes over like maybe a couple of months. So these modernizations does not also need to be high risk and all at once transformation. So the most successful organizations that we have seen has taken a structured approach and a practical approach that balances both the business priorities and with long-term goals. So the first step towards that is selecting the right advisory partner, a team that understands both the technology and the business transformation journey that you're getting into. And the next one would be like the organizations also need to clearly define their business case. So, which means identifying the operational pain points, expected outcomes, and measurable value drivers behind modernization. And we call this as phase zero or an preparatory phase where the organization prepare or embrace for the upcoming modernization efforts. And the critical step is aligning with the goals of both the CHRO and CFO, where many of this modern transformation impacts finance, HR, operations, and employee experience. So, executive alignment is essential for success. And from there, organizations should objectively assess their current state, including their processes, integrations, data quality, reporting gaps, and compliance risk. And can't uh, stress more on the phase zero preparedness. And the next step is selecting the right platform and implementation partner that can support the scalability, innovation, and long-term operational needs. And finally, the modernization should be approached in phases, and a phased framework would reduce risk, improve adoption, and also uh, help you realize that the value that incrementally, rather than just waiting for a large scale rollout or a big bang approach. And the key takeaway is that the successful modernization is not just about replacing your existing ERP systems. It's about creating a clear roadmap that delivers measurable business value with both control and clarity. Steve.
No, it's great. Great explanation there. Yeah, it's a measured and comprehensive pre-plan really makes or break an organization's transition to a modern platform. That roadmap and journey is really as important as going live in and of itself. Mahesh,
Very
do you
true.
have any cautions for buyers who may be listening from a viewer perspective?
Sure. ERP modernization, it can go wrong when organizations treat it as only an IT project, right? A modern ERP, it impacts how finance, HR, operations, managers, employees, they work every day. So the program has to be driven as a business transformation, like Ashir was explaining, and not just as a technical system replacement. A second major risk is misalignment between HR and finance. HR may be focused on workforce experience, talent, organizational agility, while finance might be focused on controls, cost visibility, planning, and reporting. Both are valid priorities, but if they're not aligned early, the implementation can create new silos instead of removing the old ones. The goal should be a shared operating model where workforce, financial, and planning decisions are connected right from the start. Change management is another area organizations often underestimate. Even when the technology is strong, users need to understand the new processes, new responsibilities, and the new ways of working. Without that adoption, the organization may only use a portion of what the platform can deliver. And finally, one of the biggest mistakes is, I would say, recreating legacy complexity in the new system. If every old customization, every old workaround or approval path and exception is rebuilt exactly as is, then the company carries the same inefficiencies forward. Modernization is the opportunity that organizations should see to simplify and standardize whenever possible and use the new platform in a cleaner and a more scalable way.
Great call outs there, Mahesh. Always keen to be aware of the red flags.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll take you through how we typically help customers ready to transition to a new modern ERP. So the slide is really illustrated to companies moving to a SaaS ERP like Workday. It's not just a software implementation. For public sector, small and mid-market organizations especially, it's a major operational transition and lift. The technology matters, but the real success comes from how well the organization prepares, executes, stabilizes, and then improves after going live. That's exactly where Kastech and E1 can support across the full journey. So on the front end of things, we help organizations build a stronger foundation before implementation even begins. A lot of companies know they need to modernize, but they may not have the internal bandwidth or that Workday specific experience to define scope, evaluate readiness, clean up data, or map out business decisions that need to be made early on. So we can help with software selection support, advisory, phase 0, and planning, data readiness, roadmap development. So the organization enters the project with a clear view of timeline, cost, risk, and long-term operating goals. During implementation, Kastech and E1 can help or lead, supplement deployment across HCM, finance, and student. So we're covering areas around integrations, reporting, security, data conversion, etc. For smaller and mid-market organizations, this is especially important because internal teams are often still running with the old business while being asked to support a major ERP transition. We bring an experienced team of Workday consultants who aid in configuration, testing, conversion, integrations, user readiness, anything go live related from a preparation standpoint without forcing those teams to overbuild internally. We also recognize that many organizations cannot simply shut down the old world while the new system is being deployed. That's why we have lights on legacy support, and we view that as such as an important part of the transition to a new ERP. We help maintain that continuity in the current environment, reduce operational risk, and free up that internal team to focus on Workday deployment instead of constantly being pulled back into the legacy system issues. Post go live, the work is not over. In many ways, that's when the organization starts really learning how Workday fits the business. Through AMS post-production support, we can really help clients stabilize, optimize, manage updates, improve reporting, and support new functionality, and really continue aligning Workday to the organizational goals. Essentially, the message here is really simple. Kastech and E1 can meet companies wherever they are in their modernization journey, whether they're still evaluating the actual move itself, preparing for the implementation, in actively going through that deployment, or just simply keeping the system stable, or trying to improve after go live. We can provide all that technical and functional support and manage services to make that transition more controlled, more practical, and ultimately more sustainable over time. So that will conclude our demonstration portion of the show, and we'll move on to the Q&A. So I know that we had a couple of questions planned. Were there any that came in from the chat, Catherine?
Yeah, let me check now. So I believe we do have some questions, and if anyone still has questions they haven't entered, feel free to enter them now. So our very first question is, what is involved in the Workday implementation process? Mahesh, would you like to try and answer that?
Sure, we can take that. Workday implementation is not the same for different clients. So Workday has different implementation strategies depending on the industry, the size of the client, and what modules they're implementing, and what is their timeline for going live with. So there's launch, launch express, go, and the actual build yourself. So depending on what the client size and industry and what exact modules they want to go with, we'll have to choose the right template, and each template involves a different process. Prototyping before or after, when do we do the data conversion, the process mapping, and stuff like that. But all in all, the bottom line is that we do data mapping, connect your data models to what Workday has, business process mapping, connect to what your processes are, what does Workday have to offer, and make those connections possible, and find out where the gaps, if any, are, and what we can do to accommodate that. And then rapid prototyping. Workday allows us to do really fast demos. Once we have the data in, we can start showing exactly how the processes are going to look in Workday. So rapid prototyping. So data mapping, business process mapping, rapid prototyping, and then we get into actual cycles of testing. That's what it looks like from a very high level.
Great. Thank you for your answer to that. And our next question came in asking what happens with existing legacy ERPs while implementation is in progress. Sridhar, would you like to take that one on?
Sure. So while this implementation is happening, or while this transformation is happening, we still keep the legacy system active because the business as usual, right? So we can't just let that go. And, we definitely need those legacy systems in action. But during that time, we wouldn't vouch for or bring in any major projects or major customizations, because sooner or later we'll be moving away from that ERP system. And as part of phase 0, we would look at the existing business processes, how it is being run in the current system, document all those processes, and that is That is where we use the legacy system a lot. And also, in addition to that, we would like to do a comparative testing, or like let's say payroll testing, where we wanted to run the payroll on both the systems and verify those results. So while we are doing that, we would also help the business users supporting the legacy system, which we call it as a lights on support, where because the business users who is managing or using the system all this while, they'll now be involved in sitting through the configuration, discovery calls into the new ERP implementation or data readiness and all those things. So that's where we help the business users with the lights on support with the existing systems. And in many cases, what we have seen is the legacy ERP would exist at least 6 months down the lane after the new ERPs go live, basically to see that no business process is breaking in there, right? And we also seen cases where the customers co-locate both the ERPs because some of the functions they still wanted to run in the legacy versus the newest ERP. And once the decision is made and once they feel very much comfortable with the newest ERP, that's where they pull the plug on the legacy. And what we often suggest is to archive the data and retain the data at least for 7 years or whatever their security or data retention rules are, so that at any given point of time we can go back into the history and see like what's existing and where we evolved from. In all ways, legacy uh, ERP still lives at least until 6 months after the post go live.
Great. Thanks for the answer, Sridhar. And I believe we have our final question, unless more comes in. How long is a typical implementation? Mahesh, would you like to take that one on?
Yeah, sure. And I'm assuming that's for a Workday implementation. Let's go with that. And like I said, when we choose to go with Workday, Workday has a lot of like pre-built implementation templates. They say whether you want to go with the business process, how many business processes you're going live with, whether you go have payroll on the thing or not. So depending on the exact customer needs, there is a different template that we'll follow, and Workday ensures that we adhere to the template to the dot. So so that the best practices during implementations are followed. And depending on this template, the timeline varies hugely. The shortest is for a small organization. We have done implementation and go live in as short as 6 weeks, but that is just an extreme short example I'm giving. But it could be as long as depending on the organization size and industry. And like Sridhar was telling before, this modernization is not a one-time touch project and get it done with. Depending on the scenario, it could be we go live with the initial few modules and then slowly roll out the rest of the modules later on, or roll out other countries later on. So the length is extremely subjective on the context of industry, employee size, their chosen go live template, and their appetite for long or short timelines.
Catherine, you want to take us home after that fantastic answer from Mahesh?
Yes, let me go back to sharing your screen. So thank you to everyone who joined for our webinar. We hope for those who joined live or are watching the webinar on demand that you'll choose to reach out to us. And we do have several ways for you to engage with us. So firstly, you could either book a discovery call, and we can also provide a free custom ERP hidden cost diagnostic for your organization. You can also book an executive lunch briefing, which is about 1 hour with your team in your office where we cover lunch. And lastly, you can also join us in person at our July Executive Leadership event in Houston, with more information coming soon, so look out for that. And we can definitely also send the replay to share with your colleagues. So feel free to email either info@kastech.com or hello@E1 Inc. for any or all of these options.
Awesome. Thanks to our panel and our guests today. We hope you gleaned some information from our presentation today, and look forward to hearing from you. Have a great week. Talk soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.